Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Welcome back, everybody, to Manufacturing Talks. I am Jim Vinosky, your host. I am joined once again by energy guru Isaac Orr. He is VP of Research at Always On Energy Research. Welcome, Isaac.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you back. Yeah, I think, it's good timing. It was actually some kind of bad news that precipitated it, but we got some good stuff to talk about. So I'm looking forward to revisiting the whole energy front.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we do, folks who didn't tune in for the other show, why don't you just give your background and how you got doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Research at Always On Energy Research, which is a company that my co-founder, Mitch and I started up last year at around this time. So we've been in business for about a year, but prior to that, we worked at Center of the American Experiment, where I was the lead of policy there. So over that time, we developed a model that allowed us to calculate the cost and reliability impacts of different policies. And, we've done a lot of work documenting that as you add more wind and solar onto your grid, you increase costs. And then frequently, the politicians who are enacting these policies want to shut down your coal plants as quickly as possible. They want to starve natural gas plants for investment. So they are making the grid less reliable over time as well. So that's basically what you have going on in half the country right now. So and then all of Europe, we can definitely talk about the fun that everyone had in Spain last week for the benefit of your listeners. But I grew up on a dairy farm in central Wisconsin, and one of the things that I always come back to is people think that milk comes from the store and they think electricity comes from the outlet. And that's why they like to believe all of these nice fantasies about the way the world really works, because they've never had to deal with producing this power and getting it to the grid, which is an incredibly complex thing. But I also think that, as people have become, how many generations can you go back where your family always had power now, Jim? It's probably 2 for most people, 3 for some. So not only do they not really understand how that power gets from the power plant to their outlet, but they also don't have an appreciation for the fact that this wasn't always the state of humanity. And previously, even if you didn't know where it came from, you at least appreciated that it was miraculous and it was also not guaranteed.
Yeah, excellent point. And it's difficult to have that reality with the voting public. It's even more difficult to see our supposed gurus, whether it's public policy folks, elected officials, even the people at the power generation companies and the grid management places can say some pretty off-putting things when it comes to that reality.
Yeah, the monopoly utility companies like your Detroit Edison's and Consumers Energy, they all make money by building new stuff. And I think we talked about this last time, but these government approved monopoly utilities are the opposite of every other kind of business in the world, right? So, if you're a big manufacturing company, you buy a new machine that helps you make widgets. Over time, you pay off that machine and your margin on the widgets goes up because you've paid off that machine. So it's like you paid off your house. So therefore, it's the lowest cost place to live. But for a utility company, whenever they build something new, they get to make a profit on it. And every year that plant depreciates, they make less profit on it. So that's why you see this push to close down the big coal plants in Michigan and replace them with wind, solar, batteries, natural gas. And that's why the utility companies are saying, oh, well, we're excited for the challenge of this energy transition, and they're all on board because it's like a green Baptist and bootleggers situation. You have the environmental lobbying groups who are all about it, but then the utilities are also for it because they know that it's going to bolster their shareholder value. So Ultimately, the consumer doesn't really have many people advocating for them. We do that at Always On Energy Research. If you want to donate to our organization, it'll be tax deductible. If anybody's looking for a write-off, it was just tax day. So hopefully the pain is still fresh in their minds looking for a way to reduce their taxable liabilities.
There you go. Well, and so you referred to kind of the root cause of the problem that got us reconnected, which the outcome is they've announced the likely closure of the Tilden iron mine up in my home stomping grounds of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And, like you said in your article about it, it's directly tied to what you just described, with Michigan chasing these green dreams and driving the cost of electricity up, right?
Yeah. So Mitch and I wrote a piece on our Substack, Energy Bad Boys. You can check it out. And there wasn't anything directly from the Tilden Mining Company that suggested that they were going to close down. But essentially what happened is the electric utility that serves the Tilden mine had to submit a document to the Michigan Public Service Commission saying how much it's going to cost to comply with Michigan's 100% carbon-free electricity mandates that were passed in 2023 when the Democrats won complete control of the legislature. So UMERC came out and they said it's going to cost their 37,500 customers, so that's families, businesses, industrial facilities, over $3 billion over 20 years in order to comply with these mandates, because they need to build a whole bunch of wind, a whole bunch of solar, and a whole bunch of battery storage in order to meet these carbon-free electricity mandates. Mm-hmm. And that's going to cause these massive increases in electricity prices that are going to be really difficult for families to stomach, but impossible for the Tilden mine to stomach. Yep. So ultimately, they're putting their manufacturers in a really bad spot. And it's not just mining in the UP, Jim. You know this. You grew up there. Forestry, manufacturing, like that's, I think we found that was something along the lines of 14% of the private payrolls up in the UP. So, and a lot of times those jobs are some of the highest paying jobs in the area. So there's a large multiplier effect that goes along with that. So ultimately, the way that the Upper Michigan Energy Resource Corporation, yep, I got my acronym right. That's the problem. With energy, you just swim in this sea of acronyms and nobody else knows what they mean. So you have to be the listener and tell them what it means. But they basically, in not so many words, said these mandates are not, so all of this generation, the wind, solar, battery storage would not be needed but for these mandates. And they're going to be so expensive that it's going to be a real economic hardship for the folks living in the Upper Peninsula.
Yep. Well, it's unfortunate, and I've talked about it in a number of shows and a number of my articles, that it's not like this is even unexpected. We've seen this played out again and again. You guys have done the work around showing how this full court press to add the wind and solar drives costs up. But what's especially infuriating for me is right when that was happening with the Michigan legislature, we had one of the legislators who, when asked about what was going on in places like Germany and the UK, said, well, we don't want to consider what's happening in other places.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to see what happens when we jump off the bridge. That would be counterproductive to us convincing everyone else that we should do so.
Yeah.
Well, and the funny thing is, like, I started that piece with a quote from Lisa Wozniak, who is the executive director of the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. And she said that it was going to lower energy costs for families and businesses, small businesses, create good paying union jobs, and tackle the climate crisis. And everything that she said, Jim, was absolutely wrong. We didn't have to do any of our own analysis for this piece, really. All we did is we looked at the filing that the Upper Michigan Energy Resources Corporation had on the Public Service Commission website. So I know that's just a lot of words that most people don't think about very often. But go to our piece, Energy Bad Boys. You can see all this stuff. It's very cleanly put out. So,
and I will have a link to that in the show description.
Excellent. So according to federal data, the residential customers served by UMERC spend about $80 a month for their electricity in 2023. And complying with these mandates would force them to pay an extra $47 a month by 2030 and an extra $87 per month by 2040. So you're talking over $1,000 a month for the same amount of electricity that they're currently consuming. So how is that anything but inflationary? It's the same thing for the businesses, and it's the same thing for the industrial customers. And, as far as creating good paying union jobs, well, I would think that the 881 good paying union jobs at the Tilden mine should count for something in this.
Yeah.
But the Tilden mine by 2030 is going to be forced to pay $8 million a month in extra electricity charges that goes up to $15 million a month by 2040. And being the rabble rouser that I am, I just wanted to see, okay, so on an annualized basis, how much profit is this mine even making? So we determined that, Cleveland Cliffs has to publish all of this stuff in their SEC filings. So basically they have to publish something called an SK 1300, which tells you about the economics of the mine, what things cost and how much they're expecting to sell the iron ore for. And we figured out that they were anticipating a 25-year mine life for this. And it was going to bring in about $167 million per year based on the company's estimates for iron ore. By 2030, just the extra electricity costs directly stemming from Michigan's renewable energy mandates would be 60% of the mine's after-tax profits. And by 2040, it would be 108.5% of the mine's profits. So basically, the mine would have to go into the red by nearly 10% in order to keep operating, just to pay for these absurd electricity costs. So unless something changes with the way that legislation is written, it's going to be, it's curtains for the Tilden mine.
Yep. Yeah. And it is unfortunate because I just read an article from a few years ago when the Empire mine was announcing they were pretty well played out and shutting down, that Tilden was good for another 30 to 40 years. And the reality now is if this legislation isn't overturned, it won't last that long.
Yeah.
And there's still good ore in the ground. It's not like where I'm from in Ironwood, which was a huge iron mining location. You can't do that anymore. There's still ore, but it's just not economically feasible to extract the ore that remains.
Right.
Here's ore that would be perfectly fine to mine, and we're just doing an own goal economically to shut it down prematurely.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you see that a lot in states where you've got a large industrial rural economy, and the power centers tend to be far away from that. So I think of like fracking in Illinois, where people in Chicago basically said, we don't want it. So Illinois missed out on the shale boom, even though they have oil and natural gas resources downstate. They weren't able to develop them, and then oil prices fell. We see it in Minnesota, where, up on the Iron Range, there's the world's largest undeveloped deposits of copper and nickel, or at least some of the world's largest copper and nickel deposits. And the folks in the Twin Cities who don't like the idea of that because they want to go canoeing there once in a while are shutting down these economic opportunities for the locals. So unfortunately, that seems to be what's happening in Michigan, although, it is noteworthy that, Michigan was able to permit the Eagle mine, which is the only primary nickel mine in the country. So, I think Michigan's got a better track record of that than some other states in the region. But the Tilden mine is the second largest iron mine in the country, but it's still only producing 0.3% of the global output. So when it comes to mining, Australia is just this massive fish in the ocean. It's 37.4%. So apparently there are single mines in Australia that produce more than the United States produces on an annual basis.
Wow.
There's 7 or 8 mines that are in operation. So, it's making it more expensive to do business in the United States is never a recipe for doing more business in the United States. So,
Right.
and like, I know that the Trump administration is doing all of these things to try to bolster domestic manufacturing, especially steel, but you've got these green state governors like Gretchen Whitmer. Tim Walz also passed a 100% carbon-free mandate in Minnesota Power's territory, which is the area where all the iron mines are. they're looking at like a $400,000 or $500,000 a month increase in their bottom line due to compliance with these green energy mandates. Eventually, I don't know how you can have a domestic steel industry where the two states that produce 90% of the iron ore, 94% of the iron ore, have these impossibly expensive electricity mandates, and they're unwilling to be flexible and offer carve-outs for this industry. Yeah, I mean, and then if Governor Shapiro enacts all the rest of the renewable energy mandates he wants to do in Pennsylvania, we'll have eliminated the source of the domestic steel and also taken one of the states where it's most prevalent, historically at least, off the table for manufacturing. So I don't know, Jim. It's not a good outlook for all the tailwinds that we have in the United States with low natural gas costs. There's just certain areas that are intent on screwing it up.
Yeah, and it's a difficulty, obviously, for the people in those areas. What the broader population needs to understand is the difficulty we're creating for the broader population. So I think the rare earth situation is a perfect example of what we're doing to ourselves. We destroyed that whole supply chain in America, and now we realize, geez, we've put ourselves on the back foot here from a national security perspective, and we ought to rebuild that. Geez, and now it's a sudden discovery that rebuilding that is really, really difficult and costly, and we may not even be able to do it.
Yeah, I just have a hard time thinking that the general population's actually going to catch up or catch on to that until it like affects them personally, until they can get whatever widget or gadget they want that needs that rare earth, and then China decides that they're going to withhold them, then they're going to start to think about it. Unfortunately, it is that milk comes from the store mentality. It's always come from the store, Jim. I don't know why you're talking about cows, because like it just comes from the store. And I think that's, some people call it affluenza, but it's just like, oh, well, I'm so used to having this really nice, stable, comfortable environment. I don't understand, or a lot of the folks that didn't grow up in small communities where you were reliant on commodity production, right? So for me, it's my farm background. I understand like, oh, some years you have a good corn crop, but it's not worth anything because everybody had a good corn crop and it's supply and demand. And I do think that kind of the white collar class, if you want to call them, doesn't really understand those fluctuations as much as working class folks, because the working class folks are the ones that say, they're the ones that get furloughed for a month if the manufacturing plant is slow because the global economy is slow. And you just don't have that same thing. Maybe with finance, you have some of that. And there have been layoffs in like the tech industry. So I don't want to seem like I'm saying they never suffer that sort of thing. But I do think that there is more of an illusion of certainty in those sectors compared to ones that are more, grounded to the real economy.
Well, and it's something I've actually personally been working to, I don't even know how to put it, overcome, I guess, is that very white collar perception that you had. I just saw a thing on X a couple of weeks ago where someone posted about how, well, people are talking about bringing manufacturing back. Are we also going to bring back hunting and gathering? It's like, you hear yourself? I tried to explain, you don't hunt and gather anymore because you have food processors who not only do what they used to do, but they also do what people in their houses used to do not that long ago, making their own food. Now we make it for you and save you that time and trouble. That's what manufacturers are doing, so you don't have to build your own house and make your own furniture and sew your own clothes. And if you think that this is some relic of our primordial past, you're a little bit off base. But
it's such a wild,
you say, white collar folks who haven't had to do that work, it's tough to get through that it has to be done, and that having us do it is a value in itself.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
But let's get back to the energy front, because I could drag you into the whole manufacturing side and spend days on it.
Manufacturing is so energy intensive.
I'm sorry, what?
I mean, it's so energy intensive, right? Especially when we're talking about bringing back all these. Yeah, you can't have a manufacturing economy without a strong energy economy. It just doesn't work. And you need low cost, reliable power. And those are two things that wind and solar aren't very good at providing. So, and then with the data center demand coming online too, we're talking about doubling the size of the grid over the next few decades, which is just kind of mind blowing. And at some point, there's the limits to economic growth in the United States will be governed by our ability to build and operate enough reliable power plants. So we either won't be able to reindustrialize the way that we want to, or we won't be able to have all of these AI data centers, because at some point you're just going to run out of juice. And I think that that's a really great way to get the pitchforks out for your industry if you're the one that puts the grid over the top of or grid over the edge, and everybody else has to deal with like a Spanish blackout situation.
Yeah. Now, I did want to swing to the positive, and that is last time we were talking, we were facing existential crisis with the then administration's policies that were already there or being rolled out around power plant mandates on particulates and more green energy nonsense and crazy incentives that drove us the wrong direction. You mentioned the Trump administration has been making some good moves. Let's talk about some of those.
Yeah, I mean, their best moves have been undoing the bad stuff that the Biden administration imposed in the last, year of their administration. So the big rules were the carbon dioxide reduction standards for existing coal-fired power plants, which basically told them to take a hike and shut down. And then you had also regulations on new natural gas-fired power plants. So not only were they kind of kneecapping the reliable coal plants that are still really important in regions like the Midwest for reliability and affordability, but it was preventing new capital from flowing to the natural gas projects that would be needed in order to replace those coal plants if that's what you actually wanted to do. So the Trump administration has announced a whole, I think it was 34 deregulatory actions from what the Biden administration had put out there. One of them is the power plant rules for CO2. Another was mercury and air toxic standards, which applies mostly to a couple power plants in North Dakota that use lignite, which is flammable dirt, but I love it. So, but also they all are looking at reconsidering the endangerment finding, which is kind of the if you're going to talk about like being Luke Skywalker and blowing up the Death Star, that is that's like the target at the end of that long tunnel in the Star Wars movie, because that's basically the justification for all of the CO2 reduction regulations that EPA has come out and enacted since 2008 when the Obama administration finalized that. So if they're able to successfully challenge that, then it becomes a lot more difficult for EPA to do any regulations on CO2 without an act of Congress, which I think is what a lot of people want. If you want Congress to regulate greenhouse gases as a pollutant, then you should update the Clean Air Act. And that hasn't been updated since the 1990s. And there was never any mention about greenhouse gases in there. And so the Trump administration is bitten off a lot. Hopefully they can chew it all. And because we do need to start repealing, especially the power plant regulations for new natural gas and existing coal. And thankfully, the administration wasn't able to promulgate any rules on existing natural gas plants before, Harris lost in November and Trump took office in January.
Yep. If we assume that Trump is able to deliver on those changes, where does that leave us as a nation? Because you made the point that about half the nation, the states, are pursuing these green energy mandates like Minnesota and Michigan. Does it become that competition where you see other big regulatory differences delineating, California from Texas, and how manufacturers leaving one for the other?
Yeah, I could see that. So definitely from a cost standpoint, Jim, I could see manufacturers saying like, look, I can pay a third less if I move my plant down to Louisiana, let's say, right? There's always going to be other considerations like, okay, what's my labor cost? What's, what's the skilled labor force like wherever I'm looking to move? How does that compare to where I'm at right now? And then, manufacturing facilities are a large capital investment up front, and it's not easy to move that, or not as easy as it would be to move like a tech firm, right? I mean, if you're going to have like big machines you'd need to wheel across the country, maybe you don't do that and you just kind of take your lumps and hope that something turns around. But and then, like, from a reliability standpoint too, it'll be interesting to see how the federal government regulates that. So each of these regions is supposed to have reliable power, but how is that going to work if each state is also given the ability to regulate what kind of Federal Power Act says each state is in charge of their own portfolio. And when the states are part of these large regional electric grids, like Michigan and Minnesota are part of MISO, then how does that work? Like there's kind of this problem where the states all think that the regional transmission organizations are in charge of reliability. And then the MISO folks say, well, no, that's a state purview. And really, whoever's in charge or whoever people say is in charge is basically like deflecting blame. So if things go wrong, then the states are going to be like, oh, well, MISO is supposed to take care of this. But if things are going well, no, we're in charge. So it's like a classic politics thing where everybody wants to take credit for the good stuff and shift blame when something bad happens. And that's probably not a very good spot to be in from a system that we're so dependent on for every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, and you made the point early on that we've completely bollocksed up any market situation in that regard. And of course, Meredith England's book spells that out in great detail. So that'd be a good place to go to understand the nuances there. With all that being said, what should people in my audience who may not have dug into this for themselves, what should they be taking away and what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so there's actually a bill in Michigan right now. I don't know where it's at in terms of the process. I haven't followed it that closely, but they want to classify the reciprocating engines that are at the Tilden mine facility and other places within the Upper Peninsula as a clean energy resource. So these use natural gas, but essentially they're looking for a way to carve out the Upper Peninsula from these mandates, because they understand how expensive that's going to be. So if they could reach out to their legislator, I would imagine most of your audience is local, but throughout the country as well, obviously. So if you're in Michigan, right? Yeah, I mean, if you're in Michigan, reach out to your state elected official and say, hey, this is a really good idea because we need to protect the UP from these types of price increases. But lower Michigan's going to get hit with this too. All the trolls, Jim. Yeah. So that's the thing. So it's just like when you hear promises like the ones that were made by the League of Conservation Voters of Michigan, lower energy costs for families, small businesses, good union paying jobs, and tackling the climate crisis, just know that, somebody's got a bridge they want to sell you to. And, wind and solar are not the lowest cost or most reliable forms of power. So, there's just been a lot of, people for decades have been hearing, we're going to run out of fossil fuels. They're going to be so expensive. We need to change. We need to go on to something different and something better, but we're going backwards. Yeah. So, wind turbines or windmills were big in the 1800s, right? Yeah. And then we stopped using them because they don't work all the time. And it's funny, the windmills that we had to like mill grain, pump water, that sort of stuff, they all had a hookup for a horse. So you could, use the horse to grind grain or whatever, pump water when the wind wasn't blowing. So even back then, we realized that you needed that backup power. Yeah. It just takes it's just your livestock if you're back in Little House on the Prairie days. So we moved to oil, coal, natural gas, and nuclear because they were always available. You could build your power plant wherever you needed to, and it was a lot more efficient and a lot more convenient. So, I think some of it's going back to like when I was in college, what was it, like 15 years ago? It was a long time ago now. But people were like going out and buying vinyl records and they thought that was cool. And then you realize like, this kind of sucks. Like they scratch, they're heavy. I can't take it with me. And there's just like a little bit of that happening, I think, with the energy thought or with the energy zeitgeist right now. So don't be a hipster, use your Spotify, don't feel bad about it. And so let's just use the stuff that works. And I think all of the above is a terrible framing for the energy debate. All of the reliable and all of the affordable, and you don't want the rest of it. And I think that that's also something that Republicans need to learn, because I hear a lot of them who should know better saying, well, all of the above. And that's just like a bad answer that a college student puts on their exam when they didn't study for it because they were out late the night before. So, I think that, unfortunately, I don't know how Congress is going to do in terms of repealing the subsidies for wind and solar, because ultimately that would be the best strategy, is you stop funding these sources with taxpayer dollars, because then you take away a lot of the incentive to build them in the first place. So, too bad we can't have nice things, Jim, but that would be, if I had a magic wand, that would be the first thing I'd do.
Yep. Let's wrap up. You mentioned nuclear. What do you guys think about the future there?
So hopefully it gets cheaper. We're fans of nuclear. We're rooting for it, but at the current price point, it's really difficult to justify building it. And it's kind of a chicken or an egg thing, because you need a bunch of people, tradesmen who've got experience building these things in order to improve and learn and do better in the future. But who wants to be the test case, or who wants to assume their place on the learning curve?
Right.
It's basically how that goes. And on that front, I think there is some reason for optimism. I think the tech companies are willing to help bend down that cost curve a little bit, because they have so much money, and they think that we want to be reliable, affordable, and carbon free, and there's one source of power that checks all three boxes. Right. So that's a sign for optimism there. But we are realists, so we'll believe it when we see it. But theoretically, nuclear would be a much better way to do it than wind, solar, and battery storage. Yeah.
Well, the good news is we do have Palisades restarting here in Michigan.
That's right.
So at least doing something to offset the coal shutdowns.
That's right. That is a good success story, and hopefully Holtec can build some of those small modular reactors that they've been talking about as well. So, I do think that nuclear has promise, but it's 2040 promise, not 2032 promise. So, so will that be soon enough for most people? Probably not. But this stuff takes a long time, and it takes a lot of investment too. So, we all want something. We all want our Amazon Prime tomorrow, and unfortunately, that's not going to be nuclear.
I said nuclear was going to be last, but I can't let you go without at least a little touching on Europe. So you have Germany and its deindustrialization. You had the crazy panic reaction at British Steel to keep their blast furnaces going in the face of needing to shut down because of their energy prices. Are people going to wise up, or are they just going to continue in that bad path?
This is a controversial statement, Jim, but I think all the good Europeans left before 1945. I think they're here now. And I don't know, it just never seems like any bad consequences enough to teach them a lesson over there.
I do have to push back, because I know some good Europeans. Poor Lars Chernow over there trying to preach.
Well, not there very often.
There are others. They're over there, but it
seems like
he
travels
not winning
a lot.
the argument yet, are they?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. There are good people over there making smart arguments, but it doesn't seem like the population writ large is willing to listen yet. And you would have thought, based on huge increase in prices, deindustrialization, all of these different factors, that it would have been enough of a reacquaintance with common sense would have happened already. But it doesn't seem to. So maybe we should just give climate policy refugee citizenship to the smart ones from over there. They can come to the United States and oh no, power prices are too high, too unreliable. All right, you get it. Come on over.
Get an easy pass.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think that that's going to stand up to whatever scrutiny it's applied to. But yeah, in some ways it's good for the United States, though. You've got companies like BASF and I think Volkswagen is opening up more plants to manufacture in the United States. And some of that investment goes to China too, obviously. But those countries look at the United States. They see that we have lower energy costs, more reliable. We have fewer regulations when it comes to, I mean, isn't it like Germany? They get 3 months off every year or something ridiculous like that in terms of, they think we're crazy because we work all the time. I think that's crazy that, 3 months, man, that's a lot of the year. It's a whole quarter. So
it is, how do you have a real job if you can walk away from it for months at a time?
I mean, like if I had walked away from the farm for months at a time, I don't know what kind of chaos comes back to that.
The cows would definitely not have been happy.
Oh no, they would have got out for sure. Who knows where they'd be?
Well, good deal, Isaac. Thank you so much for suggesting this. I think the timing is phenomenal, and it was great to catch up with you.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. Anytime.
Okay, we'll definitely have you back on. And of course, you mentioned that your compatriot Mitch could not join us this time because he's getting a house inspection. So best of luck to him on that, and we hope he's firmly settled next time we have you both on.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Well, and as always, thanks to those of you in the audience. We are here for you. And while I can't promise every show is going to be as absolutely instructive and illuminating as what Isaac brought us today and the last time he was here, everyone's going to be at least a little illuminating and constructive, or instructive. So please join us every Tuesday. We will be here. This is Jim Vinosky from Manufacturing Talks signing off. So long.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.